Hi, Jacqueline. How are you?
Hi Anna, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Really nice to see you.
And you too.
So, as you know, we're doing this video series for the folks we work with in prison. And as some people know, that I started my prison work with Beyond Recovery in England, to which you are the founder. So it's really fun to have a conversation with you. So there's a lot of people who have never, who don't know you, who are listening to this. So I'd love you to just introduce yourself and say what it is that you do in the world and in prisons.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Jacqueline Hollows. As you said, I'm the founder of an organisation, a non-profit called Beyond Recovery. And Beyond Recovery's main purpose is to share an understanding of how our minds work with people in prison or people affected by the criminal justice system. So it could be people out of prison as well. We work with men and women of all ages, but we do different projects at different times. But the programs that we run are pretty much the same. They all have the same direction and the same essence.
Cool. And I'm curious how you got into this in the beginning. Like, what made you want to work, with the prison population?
Yeah. So my background was IT and customer services. So not from a prison background or mental health or anything like that. And I was looking for something more meaningful. I was made redundant and had a lot of things happen in my life, which meant that I was starting to look for meaningful work. And I met someone who'd been in prison. I've had family members in prison when I was a child. We had pretty wild Irish family. So one of my uncles was often in and out of Birmingham. I was going to say the Birmingham Nick. But I never really thought about prison or anything that I could do to help or anything really. I never thought about it. And I think as well, I'm ashamed to say I had the bad people go to prison type of attitude, and I didn't really think about what that meant. And now, of course, I realise I got all my information from the media, so that'll be why that was. And then I met this guy, and he's one of the most inspirational guys I've ever met. He'd been in and out of prison. He'd been an addict most of his life, heroin and crack cocaine. And he was 3 years in recovery. He was starting a non-profit. And he was just one of the most inspirational people I'd ever met. So I offered to volunteer on his board of directors. I helped him through, he was going to university, his first time being educated, so I helped him through university. And through him I started meeting all these other amazing people who happened to have had addictions or have been in prison, and I started having some really cool conversations. And the reason why I started doing what I'm doing is because I saw that they were amazing, but they didn't necessarily. And I kept thinking, wow, they're so creative, or they're so resilient, or they're so determined when they want something. And they didn't really see that. They had a lot of insecurity and lack of self-worth and all of these things. And I'd been learning about this understanding of the mind that had helped me a little bit, and I hadn't really thought that much of it until I was having these conversations with these amazing people, and then thought, oh, that's what this is this conversation that no one's broken, and I can see that they're not broken, but they think they are. And so by accident I started having conversations with people, and they would be really intrigued, and that sort of just got me really interested in working with that population. So I volunteered for around about 18 months in the community, and then that eventually led me to prison.
Huh. And so when did you start Beyond Recovery? Like, when did you start your social enterprise?
Well, I actually started the business in 2015, but for 2 years before that, I was working in the community.
I didn't know.
I didn't start the business. Yeah, I didn't start the business until I'd been working with Coventry Recovery Community, and I got introduced to someone in prison who runs the substance misuse service, and it was then that I started the business, because we realised that there was a potential of getting a contract, and I didn't have a business to put the contract through. So it was then that I started Beyond Recovery, and it was named by the people in Coventry. They said, "Here she comes, Beyond Recovery." So that's why I called it that.
Really? I didn't even know. I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So I'm curious too. You said that what you share with the people in prison like helped you a little bit, and I'm just how that is evolved. Like, what, because I know that we share the same understanding, and it had such a profound made such a profound difference in my life. And I'm just curious, like, what did you see for yourself that really has made your life maybe easier, or
Yeah.
I don't know, something.
Yeah. Well, I was a slow learner, as I called myself. I didn't have initially I didn't have a big insight. I didn't even really like it. I was a bit suspicious of it. So sometimes when the lads say, is this a cult? I'm like, I know why you might think that. And I had those thoughts, but I was encouraged to take a second look through a conversation with one of our mentors. And I was going through a really difficult time in my life at the same time. I was going through a lot of financial difficulties. I pretty much lost everything. But I noticed that I wasn't really stressed. I was being more pragmatic and creative. And so although I hadn't had this big, massive transformation moment, I was listening to little nudges, I called them. Like, I'd get little nudges that helped me. But the biggest moment of change was just before I started Beyond Recovery, that same summer, where I had this sort of massive thing in the park, where I fell in love with everybody in the park who was in addiction and had been in prison, and I just realised I wanted to work with them. And I didn't know what that was. I just had this huge feeling that I wanted to work with them. Just prior to that, I was listening to one of our mentors at a conference, and I had this random thought, I can do anything. And it wasn't like a confidence thing. It was like a realizing that I literally could do anything I wanted to do. And for a couple of days, I kept going, I could do that. If I wanted to be a brain surgeon, I could just study and be a brain surgeon. If I wanted to fly around the world, if I wanted to give everything up and travel, whatever I wanted to do, I could do. And I'd never felt like that before. I'd always felt like I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't qualified enough, or, I didn't know enough. And suddenly I thought, I can do anything. And as the days passed, I realized that anybody can do anything. And it was just so huge for me. And I realized that because most of my life I walked around not knowing that. And I realized that most people walk around, or many people walk around not knowing that too. And it just became something that I wanted to tell everyone about and help them see that anything is possible. And in many ways, Anna, sort of 7 years on or whatever, that is still the insight that keeps on giving. It's what everything is built on, knowing that there is unlimited potential within every single human being, regardless to their circumstances, regardless to how far they feel they've fallen, regardless to what they think how bad they think they are. That unlimited potential is a little seed inside every single person, and with a little bit of watering, it just blossoms. And then when it starts to blossom, you know, there's no stopping it. And yeah, and I still feel that's the most powerful thing I've ever seen, even though I've seen a lot more since then.
Well, that's real. I love the way you talk about that. That's really inspiring. I know, because I see it too all the time, and it's just nice to hear you talk about it. So, you know, obviously now you've worked with hundreds of people, but I'd love stories, and I'd love, you know, just you know, a couple of stories that stand out of people that you've seen, that like you've seen that seed kind of get watered and start to grow inside them, and then now you've seen them do amazing things where maybe initially they didn't think that was possible.
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is a guy who now works for Beyond Recovery. We met him in prison. He was quite a quiet guy, older guy, but quiet, and very intellectual, and very nice, you know, very, very sort of pleasant and helpful and things like that. And I noticed him quietly always just listening and taking note of things. And the first time I really saw him blossom was, we were working with, we also teach the guys to become trainers. So we've got a train the trainer program, like yourself. And we were working with a group of guys who were learning to be trainers in prison. And he was in that group, and we wanted a champion to work with. And so I'd come to tell them who we'd chosen, and there was a really, really sweet, charismatic guy in the room, and everyone assumed it would be him. You know, and they all said his name. Oh yeah, we know who it's going to be. And they started congratulating him even before I said anything, which was a little bit like, oh no, poor guy. And I said, no, actually, and I'm going to say his name because he works for us now, but it's Derek. To be fair to the other guy, the charismatic guy, he immediately got up and shook his hand and said, fair play, mate, you know, good for you. But Derek was really shocked. And he was so grateful that we'd noticed him, even just noticed him. So he couldn't believe it. So unfortunately, because he did so well, you know, I don't know if they have the same system, but here, if they do well, they can get transferred to an open prison. So they get this like DCAT, it's called here, and because he did so well, he got his DCAT sooner than expected. So he only worked with us for a little while, and he went off to open prison. We didn't hear from him again, and I wrote to him a couple of times, but we didn't hear from him. And then he was released. And then last year, in fact, this time last year, he suddenly got in touch, and it was just before we have a big conference in London, usually at this time of year. And it was just before the conference, and he said, oh, you know, hi, I just wanted to touch base and so on. And I said, great, come to the conference. Like, some of the lads are speaking, you can get up the front, which was a bit like, oh. And he came along, and he said what he'd done since prison is he thought he had his 3 principles in his back pocket, but that he'd actually slid, and life had got a bit harder, and he'd struggled a bit because he wasn't in the conversation where he was encouraged really to keep being open-minded. And of course he came along to the conference. He was an amazing speaker. People loved him. His wife came, she spoke, it was fantastic. And then he came back into the fold, because we have a group that meets every week at the moment. Over the last 12 months, and then eventually this year, you know, he came and started working for us. Over the last 12 months, I've seen him go from somebody who was determined to be different. 3 of his children were all born with him in prison. His whole life was selling drugs, and he could never see another way of having a different life. And over the last 12 months, I've really seen him getting freer, softer, falling in love with his wife again, and does amazing work for Beyond Recovery, speaking at conferences, speaking online. I mean, blossom isn't the word for it, it's like a huge tree now. And really start to see, help other people. Like, we had a few of the lads in to work with the guys in prison, helped them, sort of came into prison, didn't want to say, ran groups in prison with us. And when he first went in, we call all the officers sir. And he said at first he wanted to go, he couldn't get used to like calling them sir. And then he started seeing how they're just doing their job, and started to respect them. I mean, just his whole life has changed completely. And that uncovering of the true him, of the potential within him, I mean, it never stops. But that has just been, that's the gift enough in itself. That's the reward enough in itself. If I never worked with any other person, seeing him is, I'm eternally grateful for that. But there are hundreds, as you know, because you work with the same population.
Yeah. And so I'm curious too, like, if people are listening to this and they're like, well, what is it that actually like, if you've got this seed inside of you, like, you've got this potential, this creative potential that's inside of you that everybody has, but we kind of get in our own way, and we can't quite, get beyond it. So here's Derek now, like, totally blossoming. What did he see? Or how, if you could describe a little bit about what did he see about himself or his mind that he was bumping up against that stopped him thinking that he could do anything other than sell drugs? Like, any more kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So he talks about it in that he saw that he got in his own way, and he didn't know that. And that's the same for all of us. So he describes it like, he had a thought that he was one way, that the only way he could ever make money was this certain particular path, that he was different, that he was, he had these thoughts that nobody else had, which made him different. So he tried to mask that, with bravado and never crying, for instance, and stuff like that. And he had a lot of thinking. He had a lot of personal thinking about himself and about his situation. And also, because he was intelligent, he really relied on his intellect. So he really, he really felt like, and it reminds me of me, he really felt like he had to white knuckle ride it through life. It's like, okay, I'm doing good, but I've got to really hold on now, and I've got to make this work, and I've got to make that happen. And then similarly to me, he then started to see, actually, it's not that he has to work so hard at everything. It's that there's something else that comes into his mind when he's not working so hard. So, I'll get caught up in writing a proposal or designing a new program, and I'll get burrowed down into it, and I'll think, oh yeah, right, I've got to figure this out. And I keep trying to figure it out, and I'll go round and round and round in my brain trying to figure it out. And then I'll go to bed, or I'll go for a walk, and I'll go, oh, I know what I need to do. It's this, and it'll be this completely different thing. And he saw that. He saw that I don't have to keep working so hard at everything and thinking it. He calls it that he was overthinking and overanalyzing. And when he stopped overanalyzing, just some of the time, he felt better. And when he felt better, he could hear that little inner voice inside, or that little sort of feeling of try this, or do that, or then he started to rely on that, and he started to see that in his and there's nothing wrong with analysing, there's nothing wrong with thinking, but we use it too much. We just overuse it all the time. And he started to see that. And then when he started to see it a little bit, actually he saw, well, that's a bit easier. So I don't have to really think about it. So that now he's at the point where he notices when he's overthinking and it makes his brain hurt too much. So he goes, hang on, there's something wrong with this picture, and he'll stop. But like me, I didn't know that there was another thing to do. I just thought it was me that I had to rely on and that I had to keep going. And then when you see, actually, no, there is something else. You know, there's an intelligence beyond my local intelligence that is actually guiding me and helping me. And even if I'm not religious, I don't believe in a God or anything like that, but I see that nature knows what to do, and I'm part of nature. And so I know what to do when I relax and let the nature part of me take over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, that's great. And it's always fun, you know. We don't have when we chat, when we're doing that. I don't get a chance to kind of hear the cool stories, so I'm sort of you know, just listening. So it's really fun. So I know we could talk about loads of different stories, but I'm gonna I'm curious, you know, that we're still kind of in lockdown a bit. And I'm curious just if there's anything that, you know, while you've been you know, at home and, you know, working in a different kind of way and whatever, is anything that you've seen, any insights that you've seen, you know, anything that's fresh, that would be fun, that I'd enjoy listening to, or would be fun to share, you know, just as before we kind of wrap this up.
Quite a lot, actually. I've really enjoyed this lockdown, but I'm very fortunate I can go out for a walk, and, you know, I realise all of that. But I have been able to see quite a lot. I'm still quite a driven person, and I do tend to run around quite a lot, which I know that you can relate to. And this slowing down has really helped me see things. And one of them is, it's a bit woo-woo, but I've really seen again that creation is happening in every moment. That literally, no matter what you turn the power of your mind to, you can create. And that can be a row with someone, or that can be a whole brand new business. You know, we've recreated our business of Beyond Recovery since we've been in lockdown. You know, it's now a remote service. All sorts of things are going on, and that came from immediately. I think it's two things. Immediately during lockdown, the first thing I wanted to do, very similar to you, is know, how can I still support the guys? What can we do? Because their lockdown is, you know, so much worse than ours. And so, you know, we just started writing letters and creating activity packs and word searches and this sort of thing, and delivering them. And I was going in and seeing the guys. And then, but I never worried. I knew that it's very possible that Beyond Recovery won't exist past lockdown. We had all these contracts lined up, gone. We had a lot of momentum lined up, gone. Everything gone, because it's different here in the UK. It's a different sort of system to in Portland. And so I knew there's a possibility that there wouldn't be a Beyond Recovery. And you know, we had to live on air for the last 3 months. But it didn't faze me. And seeing that was so helpful, because in the moment of seeing that, I was like, it doesn't matter what I'll do, it will be of service. and it will be meaningful, and I'll know what I need to do. And so I started getting ideas. Well, you know, you could do this, or you could, how about if you started doing doing something on the prison radio? And similar, we've got a TV station, and we're creating a mini series for the TV station. And you know, sort of ideas just started to come. And I really saw afresh and again how I don't have to hold on to what I think my business looks like. I can just let go, let it be, let it evolve, and it goes where it's meant to go. And it feels like someone said to me, when people are thirsty, they'll find the water. It feels like we just keep digging for the water. And you can't always dig in the same hole, but you don't know where else to dig. So you go, okay, and then the water, you know, like a divining rod, yeah. the water bubbles up. So you go and dig over there. So that's been really cool.
That's great. I love that. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I could just keep going, and I could just keep asking you questions. But I'm gonna wind it down, and I had a question, and I don't know if that you just answered it, because I was just thinking about Beyond Recovery, and I was thinking about how, you know, your organization, like same with us, our organization through this whole thing is kind of morphing, and I'm just staying curious, like you were saying, you just stay curious to the possibilities of what's going to bubble to the surface, whether it's water ideas or whatever. So I had some sort of question there, but I'm not actually sure it's actually a question. It's something about, like, what is, you know, if you just for fun, if you had a magic wand, when you think about Beyond Recovery and you think about what you do, what's the ultimate, what's the ultimate, I don't want to say goal, because that's kind of too narrow, that like the ultimate vision, if you could just for fun, just, you know, what would you want? Like if you could have a magic wand with Beyond Recovery, what would that what would that look like?
Oh my
Am I allowed to ask that question?
Yeah. So I was just checking, because what I've always said is that everybody who comes through the gate gets this understanding. And I mean staff, support people, the cooks, you know, everybody, not just the guys and girls in prison. And I was just checking, like, is that still the goal? And I would love that. I think we would have communities of people who want to help each other. And some of them would have keys, and some of them would have to get locked up at night. But they would be communities of people who want to help each other, because I think that prison is full of untapped potential, and those people with that untapped potential can change the world. And I'd like to offer that as a possibility.
Oh, I got goosebumps. I love that. Everyone, don't you find as well, like people in the groups going, oh my God, it'd be so great if the officers could get this, if the staff could get this, oh, they need it, oh, everyone could get this. And so I second that. I'm on board with that. Yeah. I'll sign up for that. Let's do it. Let's change the world. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, I really enjoyed chatting with you as always, and I just really appreciate having started my whole journey with you in prison in England. So thank you for joining us here. However many, like 4 years now I've been in Portland.
Wow.
Isn't it crazy? It's 4 years. And so I just love having this conversation, you know, and long may we continue to create and get curious about life.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I've loved being here.
Yeah.
And good luck, guys. Good luck.
You.
And girls.
Yeah. Thank you.